Greetings once again, students, and welcome back to another session here in TESOL Methods. We're looking at CALLA's planning and monitoring and evaluating section in the scheme there. This again, we're using Shama's textbook, the CALLA Handbook, which again I would recommend that you pull out so that you can understand what's going on here. They also have an excellent website where you can get a lot of the same information. Today we're going to be looking at how to plan for CALLA instruction. We're going to look at the phases that are involved, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how to evaluate whether the instruction was actually worthwhile and effective. First thing that you're going to want to do as you're preparing CALLA instruction materials is that you're going to want to find out what your students know. You're going to assess their knowledge. So you're going to find out what their background knowledge is. You're going to have to try to have them do a self-assessment. What do they already know about the fields that they're studying and about their language abilities in English. You also should find out a little bit about their demographics. What's their first language? How often is it spoken in the home? And that kind of thing. And after you assess that prior information, it's going to help you better understand and set up the goals and objectives that you're going to need to set up for your classes. Of course, after you have that background knowledge, after you have the prior knowledge that the students understand, then you can take the knowledge that you have related to the content areas, and you can begin to break that down into goals and objectives, which is the next point here that you're going to have. You want to try to set objectives now that you have the background and you have the information from the areas of study. You should set objectives for content and linguistics and strategic. Try to set up a strategy and linguistic areas and content areas for your lessons. Please bear in mind that these areas should be set up that they are measurable goals. Measurable content goals, measurable linguistic objectives, and measurable strategies. That's basically what I would consider the scope of elements that you're going to be covering in this particular lesson. You may also do the same thing for the entire course or for the entire curriculum. You set up the things that they're supposed to be studying in that particular area. After you set up your goals and you know what it is you're aiming for, you now need to collect the materials that you need, and you need to start putting them together. So, for example, if you're dealing with a health class and you students need to understand the effects of certain types of drugs, and so you're going to have that content information, but you're also going to have to break that down linguistically. What special vocabulary will they need? What special phrases might they need? What special grammar might be included in that? Questions that they might be using, some functional skills, and then strategies. If you're going to someplace and people are using drugs, what do? If you get injured and you're allergic to that, you have to go to the doctors. What types of strategies might be involved in asking for help or asking for clarity or refusing, again, if someone's trying to offer you something, just for example. And so you try to set up goals for each of these areas. Assemble the materials, and after they are all assembled, then you'll want to plan the sequence. What are you doing first and next and next? Now, there is a CALLA plan laid out for the procedures for actually doing that, and we're going to look at that next. But you always want to remember that you want to have a sequence laid out. It also doesn't mean that you're going to do it necessarily in the order that you have, but you're going to have a plan to try to get it done. The phases of CALLA are these five points here: prepare, present, practice, and then expand. The first point here is to prepare your students, and you want to get them ready for what's coming. So you want to prepare them by, one, finding out what they already know, maybe giving them an overview of the materials that are being covered, see how much they know about it. Also gives them an opportunity to get used to what's going to be coming. And so you may have some pre-activities that are going on here that might introduce the topic. It might introduce special vocabulary, special phrasings that they might use, and it's also going to get them ready for what's coming. The next thing that you're going to be doing is presenting. You're going to be presenting the materials for them so that they can learn about these new concepts and these new vocabulary, and also the content that they're actually going to be covering. You may have them, after the materials are covered, you may have them be doing a variety of things in the practice phase where they're working together or working on some activity that enables them to practice with this new vocabulary, with these new words, and with the new content, and also with the new strategy. As I mentioned before, oftentimes it's good to have students get into small groups and work together. So some type of activities that allow them to practice with the elements that are there. You may, well, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but you may have them work in pairs in trying to accomplish a particular task. You may give them a scenario where a particular event has happened and they now need to engage the strategies that you had practiced. But regardless, you're going to want them to practice. When you're done with that, you're going to want them to, this is the wrong word here, folks, you're going to want them to evaluate how well they did. How good were the materials? How helpful was this? And so you'll note, and many times in my classes at the end of the semester, I'll be asking that. How was this? Was it helpful? Was it good for your learning abilities? Did you get something out of this? What is it that you got? You know, how can we make this better type of thing? Some type of self-evaluation. Did they learn? And the last thing is expansion. Always a good thing to do. It's always good to have extra materials around just in case. It's also good to let them know they can build on their own. So students can now take the information that they have already learned through the presentation and the practice. They can take this new information, they can combine it with some of the old. Maybe they'll take this strategy that they've learned in this particular lesson and try to apply it to some other area. So you can have them expand what's going on. Sometimes in a reading activity, for example, where they're required to respond in some way. So if we're keeping the same idea of health, for example, I remember having my students read a short story. It was about 3 or 4 paragraphs long. It was about this girl who was considering committing suicide. And she's home alone, and she's thinking about it, and she gets a knife, and she's thinking about slitting her wrists. And just then her parents come home, and she drops the knife, and she goes and sits down, and her parents come in and ask her, "Oh dear, how was your day?" And she said, "Oh, it's just an ordinary day like any other day." Of course, it has all this different meaning. And what I did after we went through, presenting the materials, and we talked about a strategy for dealing with problems like this, and we also talked about the vocabulary. And one of the things I had them do for an expansion was to write a letter to this girl. And so that they were trying to use the materials that they've learned in an extended type of way that, I didn't know what was going to happen. So that would be an interesting thing that you could do in again, some form of expansion. So you have materials that you cover, but then you can try to grow that, a what-if type of thing. What if you actually met this person and you could respond to them? What would you do? So expansion is going to be the last phase that you're going to have here in a CALLA instruction. You've done the preparing, you've prepared your students, you've presented the materials, you've practiced, and now that you've gone through all this, now you want to evaluate. How was this? And you can evaluate yourself, obviously, but you can also have other people evaluate you. Record your class, or have someone sit in and watch, and then you can see about your instructional strategies. How was everything going? How was your voice? Did you have appropriate speech? Were you too fast or too slow? Was your volume not good? Tone, was it clear? Was it understandable? So you should be able to monitor that and see how that is. Is that going to be an impediment to your teaching, or is it going to be a plus? Same thing with the topic. Did you know all the stuff, right? I mean, I know if I'm going to be teaching a course on health, I'm going to have to brush up on some information that I don't have. So I'm going to need to be knowledgeable. Is it interesting? Were you interested? Were you like, yeah, this is great stuff? Were you enthused? Very, very true idea here. If you're excited about it, very often your students are going to be excited about it too. So you should be interested. Was it well organized? Was it put together in such a way that it's easy, a nice, easy flow, and students can use it to continue learning? Can they go back to it and learn from it? Okay, so the topic. And then, of course, your teaching method. Did you present new vocabulary and new concepts in this lesson? Obviously you're reviewing the old and you're letting them see how the old can connect to the new, whether it's concepts or linguistics or strategies. But, did you connect to the new? Did you differentiate if necessary, where some students needed extra scaffolding and others didn't, where others could be doing things alone? Did you change up your teaching style so that you can meet the needs of the students that you had? Did you have a positive environment? I don't know what positive environment necessarily means, but for me, it's that I'm always encouraging my students. I'm always giving them a challenge and letting them know that they can meet and succeed the challenge. Did you use or teach multiple strategies? Try to give students opportunities to see these multiple strategies in action and actually use them. A variety of things that you can look at when you're analyzing a CALLA instruction episode, right? Another thing that you should be looking at as far as evaluation are you monitoring your own professional development? I have said this before, and I'll say it again, that you should always be learning and studying. It is disheartening to me to see teachers who have stopped learning and they're not interested in trying to learn new ideas and understand new things. Now, I say that with a very large caveat. There are many things that come out into the news and say, oh, this is new, oh, this is great, and it's not new and it's not great, it's the same old thing. It's kind of like the idea of the word New Age, the New Age movement. Well, it isn't new and it's not an age. It's been here before, and you will find as you study and begin to learn, there are a lot of concepts and ideas that come around and someone says, hey, it's been there before. We've seen this before. Now, that doesn't mean there's not new stuff coming, and so we should continue to try to develop and do research and learn new things. But bear in mind, there's also a lot of stuff there that's just been rehashed and repackaged. Last thing here is that you might want to get a coach. As I've mentioned before, iron sharpens iron, so one man can sharpen another. You might want someone to evaluate you. Obviously, you want to be able to take their criticisms properly. But if you get a coach, they're going to be able to help you along. They're going to be able to help and show you your responsibilities as a CALLA instructor as well as the student responsibilities as a CALLA learner. But if you get a coach, that might be a plus for you as far as trying to evaluate your teaching abilities. And that's all that I have for this particular chapter about planning, monitoring, evaluating. There are some very good samples in here, one in particular, which you've seen partially before, the CALLA Instructional Sequence Guideline. It's on page 93 in the book that I have. It's a nice one-page worksheet that helps you develop a CALLA activity with all of the appropriate guidelines and all of the appropriate procedures that you would be going through. So I would recommend that you take a look at that and use that as a possible guide for building CALLA instructions. That's all I have now. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.